Marcel wiped sweat from his brow, the kitchen's heat clinging to his skin like a second coat. The clatter of pots and the sizzle of onions filled the air, but his focus was razor-sharp on the sauce simmering before him. Tonight, he'd perfected a recipe born from his grandmother's weathered hands, one that could silence the venom of Madame Dubois. She'd be here soon, her sharp heels clicking through the dining room of L'Etoile d'Or, ready to hurl insults at his craft. Every Friday, she came, a storm in a silk dress, her voice slicing through the restaurant's hum. Mediocre seasoning, Marcel. And that accent, can you not speak clearly? The other diners would glance away, embarrassed, but she thrived on their unease, her wealth a shield for her cruelty. He stirred the sauce, the scent of thyme and roasted garlic rising, and pictured her face, those pinched lips, the cold glint in her eyes. 4 months, she'd targeted him, ever since he'd risen from line cook to head chef at 29. His dishes drew crowds, food critics raving about his bold flavors, but Dubois saw him as an upstart, a country boy who didn't belong in her elite world. She'd mock his Provençal roots, his slight lisp, anything to keep him small. Last week, she'd sent back his cocoa vin, claiming it lacked soul, though her plate was half empty. The staff whispered she just liked the power, the way her words made Marcel's jaw tighten. But tonight, he had a plan. The new dish wasn't on the menu yet, a secret weapon he'd been tweaking for weeks. It was simple braised lamb with root vegetables, infused with rosemary and a hint of lavender, his grandmother's way. Rustic, yes, but layered with flavors that could make a stone weep. He'd serve it to her blind, let her taste it without knowing it was his. If she bit, if she praised it, he'd have her. The thought made his pulse quicken. He wasn't just fighting for his pride, this was for every server she'd snapped at, every cook she'd belittled. For himself. Marcel, she's here, called Elise, the hostess, poking her head through the kitchen door. Her eyes held a mix of pity and warning. Table 7, as usual. Already asked for you. He nodded, wiping his hands on his apron. Let her wait a bit. Bring her the wine list first. Elise smirked. Stalling the dragon? Something like that. He turned back to the sauce, adjusting the heat. The kitchen buzzed around him, cooks chopping, waiters darting in and out, but his mind was on Dubois. She wasn't just a customer, she was a test. He'd grown up poor, scraping by in a village where his mother cleaned houses and his father fixed tractors. Cooking had been his escape, his way to prove he was more than his circumstances. He'd clawed his way to Paris, to this Michelin-starred kitchen, only to find a new hurdle in her. But he wasn't the boy who flinched at raised voices anymore. The door swung open again, and Jean, the sous chef, leaned in. She's already complaining. Says the tablecloth's wrinkled. Marcel snorted. Of course she is. Tell her I'm coming. He plated a small amuse-bouche, tiny goat cheese tarts, a peace offering to buy time. As he handed it to a waiter, he caught his reflection in a steel countertop, dark eyes, stubble jaw, the faintest scar on his cheek from a childhood fall. He looked tired but determined. Dubois could cut him down, but she wouldn't break him. Not tonight. Out in the dining room, the chandeliers cast a golden glow over white tablecloths and clinking glasses. Marcel stepped through the chaos, his chef's coat crisp despite the kitchen's heat. Dubois sat at her usual table, her silver hair pulled tight, a diamond necklace glinting like armor. Her companion, a bored-looking man in a suit, scrolled on his phone. She spotted Marcel and raised a manicured hand, snapping her fingers. Finally, she said, her voice loud enough to turn heads. I thought you'd forgotten me, Marcel. Or are you too busy butchering another dish? The room hushed. Diners pretended to study their menus, but their eyes flicked toward him. Marcel forced a smile, his voice steady despite the heat in his chest. Good evening, Madame Dubois. I'd never forget you. How can I make your night perfect? Her lips curled, a predator sensing weakness. Perfect? Your food would need a miracle for that. But let's see if you can manage something edible. Surprise me if you're capable. The barb landed, but Marcel didn't flinch. I'll do my best, he said, bowing slightly. Something special's coming. As he turned back to the kitchen, her laughter followed him, sharp and deliberate. The other diners resumed their chatter, but the air felt heavier, charged with her presence. Marcel pushed through the swinging doors, his mind racing. This wasn't just about one dish, it was about proving he belonged. He'd spent years honing his craft, studying under chefs who'd screamed him into precision, and now he was here, at the top of his game. Dubois wasn't just insulting him, she was insulting the hands that taught him, the village that raised him. "Elise," he called, catching the hostess as she rushed by. "When her main course comes, don't tell her it's mine. Call it a house special." Elise raised an eyebrow but nodded. "You're playing with fire, Marcel?" "Maybe," he said, a grin tugging at his lips. "But I'm good with heat." Back at his station, he checked the lamb, the meat tender and fragrant, the vegetables caramelized to perfection. It was ready. He plated it carefully, each element deliberate, the sauce a glossy ribbon tying it together. This was his shot, his gamble. If Dubois loved it, he'd have her respect, or at least her silence. If she didn't, he'd be back to square one, her voice ringing in his ears. "Table 7, he told the waiter, handing over the plate. "Make it quick." As the dish left the kitchen, Marcel leaned against the counter, his heart pounding. The betrayal wasn't just Dubois' cruelty, it was the way she made him doubt himself, the way her words crept into his quiet moments. But he'd fought harder battles than this. He thought of his grandmother, her calloused hands stirring pots over a wood stove, her voice soft but firm, "Cook with love, Marcel. That's what stays." Tonight, he'd cooked with love and a little defiance. He peeked through the kitchen door's window, watching the waiter set the plate before Dubois. She leaned forward, inspecting it like a judge, then took a tentative bite. Marcel held his breath. This was it, the moment he'd been building toward. Her fork paused, then dipped again, faster this time. She was eating. No complaints, no theatrics. Just silence. For the first time in months, Marcel felt a spark of hope. Marcel watched through the kitchen door's narrow window, his pulse a drumbeat in his ears. Madame Dubois' fork moved steadily, scooping up lamb and vegetables, her usual scowl absent. Her companion, the man in the suit, leaned in, saying something Marcel couldn't hear. She nodded, her eyes still on the plate, and took another bite. The dining room hummed with chatter, but her silence was louder. For once, she wasn't performing, wasn't tossing barbs for the room to hear. Marcel's chest tightened with a mix of pride and nerves. The dish was working, his grandmother's recipe, his gamble, was working. He pulled back from the door, wiping his hands on a towel. The kitchen swirled around him, cooks shouting orders, pans hissing, waiters weaving through with trays. Jean, the sous chef, caught his eye. "She's not yelling yet," Jean said, grinning. "That's a win, right?" "Don't jinx it," Marcel muttered, but a smile tugged at his lips. He busied himself checking a batch of risotto, though his mind was on Dubois. What was she thinking? Was she savoring the lavender's faint sweetness, the way the rosemary grounded the dish? Or was she just biding her time, ready to spit venom when the waiter returned? He'd seen her flip before, one moment praising a wine, the next calling it swill. She was unpredictable, a storm that could shift in a breath. Elise slipped into the kitchen, her face alight. "Marcel, she's raving. Told her friend it's the best thing she's eaten in years. She wants to know who made it." Marcel froze, the ladle in his hand hovering over the pot. "You didn't tell her, did you?" "Not a word," Elise said. "Called it a house special, like you said. She's hooked, though. Keeps going on about the flavors, rustic but refined," she said. He let out a breath, the tension in his shoulders easing just a fraction. Rustic but refined. That was his grandmother's cooking, her love distilled into every pot. He could almost hear her voice, soft and steady, urging him to keep going. But this wasn't over. Dubois' praise was a crack in her armor, not a surrender. If she learned it was his dish, would she double down, too proud to admit she'd been wrong? Or would she see him differently? He wasn't sure which scared him more. "Keep her happy," he told Elise. "Offer her dessert on the house, something light, the lemon tart. I need her in a good mood." Elise nodded and darted back out. Marcel turned to Jean. We're not done. She's eating, but she's not won over. Not yet. Jean raised an eyebrow. You're really going for her throat, huh? Not her throat, Marcel said, stirring the risotto. Her pride. The night wore on, the kitchen a blur of heat and motion. Marcel moved between stations, tasting sauces, adjusting seasonings, but his thoughts kept drifting to table 7. He imagined Dubois finishing the last bite, her sharp tongue stilled, maybe even humbled. It was a dangerous hope, but he clung to it. He'd spent months swallowing her insults, each one a jab at his roots, his skill, his right to be here. This dish was his answer, proof he wasn't the mediocre fraud she claimed. An hour later, Elise burst back in, her eyes wide. Marcel, you need to see this. What now? He set down a knife, his stomach nodding. Had Dubois turned? Was she trashing the dish after all? She posted about it, Elise said, holding up her phone. On X, look. Marcel took the phone, squinting at the screen. There was Dubois' account, her profile picture all diamonds and haughty angles. The post was short but glowing, an unexpected gem at La Toile d'Or tonight. A house special, braised lamb with a whisper of lavender, is divine. Whoever made this, I salute you. It already had dozens of likes, comments piling up, must try. Sounds incredible. Who's the chef? He handed the phone back, his throat tight. She doesn't know it's me. Not yet, Elise said, smirking. But the internet's going wild. People are tagging the restaurant, asking for the recipe. You're about to be famous. Famous. The word felt foreign, too big for the cramped kitchen, the scarred hands that had shaped his life. He didn't want fame, he wanted respect. But this was a start. Dubois' post was a spark, and sparks could spread. If the dish went viral, if the restaurant's name soared, she'd have to face the truth, the mediocre chef she'd mocked had bested her. Don't get cocky, Jean warned, tossing a dish towel over his shoulder. She's still Dubois. One wrong move, and she'll eat you alive. I know, Marcel said. He glanced at the clock, closing time was near. The dining room would empty soon, but Dubois always lingered, sipping espresso, holding court. He had a choice, stay in the kitchen, let her leave with her praise floating online, or step out and reveal himself. The thought made his palms sweat. Confronting her could backfire, she might lash out, embarrassed, and turn her followers against him. But staying silent felt like hiding, and he was done hiding. He untied his apron, folding it neatly. I'm going out there. Jean's eyes widened. You sure? She's still got claws. I'm sure, Marcel said, though his gut churned. He pushed through the swinging doors, the dining room quieter now, most tables cleared. Dubois sat alone, her companion gone, scrolling on her phone. The remnants of the lamb dish sat before her, the plate nearly clean. She looked up as he approached, her expression unreadable. Madame Dubois, he said, his voice steady despite the thud of his heart. I heard you enjoyed the house special. She set down her phone, her eyes narrowing slightly. It was exceptional. A rare triumph for this place. Who created it? He hesitated, the weight of the moment pressing down. This was it, his chance to claim the victory or let it slip. He thought of his grandmother, her quiet strength, and straightened. I did. Her lips parted, just a fraction, surprise flickering before she masked it. You, she said, her tone caught between disbelief and curiosity. Marcel, the country boy? The same, he said, meeting her gaze. It's my grandmother's recipe. Rustic, like me. The silence stretched, taut as a wire. Then, to his shock, she laughed, not her usual sharp, cutting laugh, but something softer, almost genuine. Well, she said, leaning back. You've surprised me. That doesn't happen often. He didn't know what to say, so he nodded, his mind racing. Was this a truce? A trap? Before he could decide, she picked up her phone again, typing quickly. I'm updating my post, she said, not looking at him. The world should know the chef's name. Marcel stood frozen as she typed, her fingers swift. When she finished, she met his eyes, a glint of something new in her expression, respect, maybe, or at least the start of it. "Don't let it go to your head," she said, but there was no venom in her voice. He nodded again, turning back to the kitchen before she could see the grin breaking across his face. The post was out there now, his name tied to the dish, spreading like wildfire. He'd won this round, not just against Dubois but against the doubt she'd planted in him. But he knew her, she wasn't done. Not yet. Back in the kitchen, Elise was waiting, her phone still in hand. "It's blowing up," she said, showing him the updated post. His name was there, bold and clear, with hundreds of likes already. "You did it, Marcel." "Not yet," he said, grabbing his apron. "But I'm getting there." Marcel barely slept that night, his phone buzzing with notifications until he silenced it. Dubois' post had exploded, shared across X by food bloggers, critics, and strangers hungry for the next big thing. By morning, L'Etoile d'Or was trending, the words Marcel's lamb and rustic masterpiece plastered across social media. Reservations poured in, the restaurant's phone ringing off the hook. Elise texted him screenshots of comments, "Genius chef. Booked a table for next week. Who is this Marcel guy?" He stared at the screen, a knot in his chest. This was what he'd wanted, proof he belonged, but the weight of it felt heavier than he'd expected. In the kitchen, the mood was electric. The staff buzzed with excitement, high-fiving as they prepped for the evening rush. Jean slapped Marcel's shoulder. "You're a star, man." Dubois didn't know what hit her. "Don't get used to it," Marcel said, chopping onions with steady hands. "She's not the type to stay quiet." He'd seen the shift in her eyes last night, that flicker of respect, but he didn't trust it. Dubois was a snake, charming one moment, striking the next. Her updated post, naming him, was a victory, but it also put a target on his back. If she felt cornered, she'd come for him harder. The restaurant was packed by 6, every table filled, the air thick with laughter and clinking glasses. Marcel worked the line, calling out orders, tasting sauces, his focus razor-sharp despite the chaos. The lamb dish was selling out, waiters rushing to keep up. He overheard snippets from the dining room, diners raving, phones snapping photos of their plates. It was surreal, his grandmother's recipe now a sensation, her memory alive in every bite. Elise darted into the kitchen, her face flushed. "She's back." Marcel's knife paused mid-chop. "Dubois? Who else?" "Table 7, solo." Ordered the lamb again. He set the knife down, wiping his hands. "She's testing me." "Or she's obsessed," Elise said, smirking. "Either way, she's watching you." Marcel nodded, his mind racing. Dubois wasn't here to eat, she was here to measure him, to see if last night was a fluke. He prepped her plate himself, double-checking every detail, the lamb sear, the vegetables glaze, the sauce's balance. It was perfect, just like before. But as he handed it to the waiter, a new idea sparked. He couldn't keep playing defense, waiting for her next move. He had to push her, force her to see him as more than a target. "Elise," he said, catching her before she left. "Tell her I'd like to invite her to a cooking class. My kitchen, next week." Just her. Elise's eyes widened. "You're inviting the dragon to your lair?" "Something like that," he said. "If she says yes, she's in my territory. If she says no, she looks scared. Either way, I win." She shook her head but grinned. "Bold move, Marcel." "I'll tell her." The night flew by, the kitchen a whirlwind. Marcel didn't have time to check on Dubois' reaction, he was too busy keeping plates moving, the staff leaning on him to set the pace. But he felt her presence, a shadow looming over the triumph. When the last table cleared, Elise found him scrubbing a pan. "She said yes," she reported. "Cooking class, next Tuesday." Looked shocked, but she didn't hesitate. Marcel's grip tightened on the sponge. Good. He didn't know what to expect when Tuesday came. The restaurant was closed, the kitchen quiet except for the hum of the fridge. He'd set up a station for Dubois, knives, cutting board, ingredients for a simple dish, ratatouille, another nod to his roots. It was approachable but precise, a test of skill and patience. If she struggled, she'd have to face her limits. If she succeeded, maybe she'd understand what cooking meant to him. Dubois arrived on time, her heels clicking as she stepped into the kitchen. "No diamonds today, just a tailored blouse and a wary expression." "Marcel," she said, her voice cool but not hostile. "I assume this is another attempt to impress me?" "It's a chance to learn," he said, gesturing to the station. "You've got opinions on my food. Let's see what you can do." Her lips twitched, almost a smile. "You're braver than I thought." They started with the basics, chopping vegetables, layering flavors. Dubois was clumsy, her knife skills non-existent. She sliced zucchini unevenly, muttering under her breath, but she didn't quit. Marcel corrected her gently, showing her how to hold the knife, how to let the blade do the work. "It's not about force," he said. "It's about rhythm." She glanced at him, her guard slipping. "You sound like my old piano teacher." "Cooking's music," he said, stirring a pot of tomatoes. "You just have to listen." They worked in silence for a while, the kitchen filling with the scent of garlic and herbs. Dubois fumbled a pepper, dropping it on the floor, and laughed, a real laugh, not the sharp one she used to cut. Marcel raised an eyebrow. "You're enjoying this?" "Don't flatter yourself," she said, but her tone was lighter. "I'm just surprised you're a decent teacher." He hid a grin, turning back to the stove. This was working. She was human in here, not the untouchable socialite who ruled the dining room. But he stayed sharp, waiting for the shift. She hadn't apologized for months of insults, hadn't acknowledged the pain she'd caused. He wasn't sure she ever would. The ratatouille came together slowly, her efforts messy but earnest. When they plated it, the dish was uneven, the vegetables slightly overcooked, but it smelled like home. Dubois stared at it, her hands on her hips. "It's not pretty," she said. "Taste it," Marcel said, handing her a fork. She took a bite, her eyes closing briefly. "Not bad," she admitted. "But it's no lamb." He chuckled. "You'll get there." As they cleaned up, she spoke again, her voice quieter. "Why did you invite me here, Marcel?" "Really?" He wiped down the counter, choosing his words. "You've been tearing me down for months. I wanted you to see what I do, what it takes. Maybe then you'd stop." She didn't flinch, but her eyes softened. "I don't tear down what isn't worth noticing. You're good, Marcel. Too good for me to ignore." It wasn't an apology, but it was close. He nodded, unsure how to respond. The air between them felt different, less like a battlefield. When she left, promising to return for another lesson, Marcel stood alone in the kitchen, the weight of the day settling in. He'd cracked her shell, but the war wasn't over. She was still Dubois, and he was still the chef she'd tried to break. That night, he checked X. The buzz around the lamb dish hadn't faded, new posts, new reviews, even a food critic teasing a visit. But what caught his eye was Dubois' latest post, a photo of her uneven ratatouille, captioned, "Learning from the best." At L'Etoile Marcel. It had thousands of likes. He set the phone down, a slow grin spreading. She was playing a new game now, and he was ready for it. Marcel leaned against the kitchen counter, the morning light filtering through the restaurant's windows. The buzz from Dubois' ratatouille post still hummed online, her followers gushing over her humility and tagging him as the genius behind it. L'Etoile d'Or was booked solid for weeks, the lamb dish a phenomenon. But Marcel wasn't celebrating yet. Dubois shifted her laughter, her grudging respect, felt fragile, like a dish balanced on a tray. She'd softened, but she hadn't surrendered. He knew her type, pride ran deeper than a single cooking lesson. The kitchen door swung open, and Elise rushed in, her eyes bright. "Marcel, you've got a critic tonight. Big one. From Lou Gourmet. They're coming for the lamb." His stomach tightened. Le Gourmet's reviews could make or break a chef. "They say who they are?" She shook her head. "Anonymous, as usual. But they booked last minute, prime time. Smells like a critic." Marcel nodded, already mapping the night in his head. The lamb had to be flawless, every plate a mirror of the one that hooked Dubois. But his mind drifted to her, too. She texted him yesterday, confirming another cooking lesson for next week. No barbs, just a curt, "I'll bring better knives." It was progress, but he couldn't shake the feeling she was still playing a game, her charm a velvet glove over a steel fist. The dinner rush hit like a tidal wave. The kitchen roared, pans clanging, orders shouted, steam rising in clouds. Marcel moved like a conductor, tasting, tweaking, sending plates out. The lamb was flying, each one perfect, the staff in sync. He caught glimpses of the dining room through the door's window, packed tables, wine flowing, faces lit with anticipation. Somewhere out there was the critic, their fork poised to judge him. Halfway through service, Elise slipped in. "Dubois is here. Table 7, solo again. Ordered the lamb, no fuss." Marcel's jaw tightened. Of course she was here, the night a critic was watching. Was it a coincidence, or was she testing him again? "Keep an eye on her," he told Elise. "Let me know what she says." He plated her dish himself, the lamb glistening, the sauce a perfect sheen. As the waiter carried it out, Marcel felt a prickle of unease. Dubois wasn't just a customer tonight, she was a wild card. If she praised the dish, it could seal the critic's opinion. If she turned, she could undo everything. The night blurred on, the kitchen a furnace. Marcel stayed sharp, but his thoughts kept snagging on Dubois. What was she doing out there? Was she savoring the lamb, or picking it apart? Elise didn't return with updates, and he couldn't leave the line to check. By the time the last plates went out, his shirt was soaked with sweat, his hands aching from gripping tongs. Finally, Elise reappeared, her face unreadable. Critic left. No clue who they were, but they cleaned their plate. "Dubois, though, she wants to talk to you." Marcel wiped his hands, his pulse quickening. "She say why?" "Nope. Just said, tell Marcel I'm waiting." He stepped into the dining room, the chandeliers dimmed, most tables empty. Dubois sat at table 7, a half-empty espresso cup before her, her posture regal but less rigid than usual. Her plate was spotless, not a scrap left. She looked up as he approached, her eyes sharp but not cruel. "Marcel," she said, setting down her cup. "Sit." He hesitated, then pulled out a chair. The room was quiet, the staff cleaning up, their clatter faint. "You enjoyed the lamb again?" he asked, keeping his tone neutral. "It was impeccable," she said, her voice low. "As good as the first time. Maybe better." He waited, sensing more. She leaned forward, her fingers tracing the cup's rim. "I owe you an apology. I've been harsh. Unfairly so. I saw you as an easy target, someone to keep in line. But you're not that. You're exceptional." The words hit like a shockwave. He'd expected a jab, a backhanded compliment, not this. "Why now?" he asked, his voice steady despite the churn in his gut. She sighed, a rare crack in her armor. "That cooking lesson, it wasn't just about the food. You made me see the work, the heart. I've spent years judging, thinking I knew better. But you humbled me, Marcel. And tonight, watching this place thrive because of you, I realized I was wrong." He studied her, searching for the catch. But her eyes held no malice, just a quiet intensity. "You hurt a lot of people," he said. "Not just me." "I know," she said, her voice softer. "I can't undo that. But I can do better. Starting with you." He didn't know what to say. Months of her insults flashed through his mind, her sneers, her laughter, the way she'd made him doubt his worth. But here she was, stripped of her usual venom, offering something real. He wasn't ready to forgive, not fully, but he felt the ground shift beneath him. "Prove it," he said finally. "Words are easy." She nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Fair enough. I have an idea, a community food project. Free meals for those who can't afford them, using local ingredients. I'd fund it, but I want you to lead it." Your vision, your recipes. Marcel blinked, caught off guard. Why me? Because you cook with soul, she said simply. And because I trust you. He leaned back, the weight of her offer sinking in. This wasn't just a truce, it was a partnership, a chance to do something bigger than the restaurant. But it meant tying himself to her, trusting a woman who'd been his enemy for months. Could he do it? Did he want to? I'll think about it, he said, standing. But thanks for the apology. She nodded, rising too. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. As she left, Marcel stood alone in the dining room, the silence heavy. The Critic's review would drop soon, and with it, the fate of his reputation. But Dubois' words, her offer, loomed larger. He'd won her respect, maybe even her alliance, but at what cost? He thought of his grandmother, her voice urging him to cook with love, not anger. This project could be that, a way to give back, to honor her. But he'd have to watch Dubois closely. The next morning, his phone lit up with a notification from Lou Gourmet. The review was live. He opened it, his heart pounding. L'Etoile d'Or has found its star in Marcel Dupont, it began. His braised lamb is a revelation, rustic yet refined, a dish that demands attention. This is a chef to watch. 5 stars. He set the phone down, a grin breaking free. The Critic was won, the restaurant soaring, and Dubai was no longer his enemy. But the real test was coming, working with her, building something new. He wasn't sure he was ready, but he'd never back down from a challenge. In the kitchen, he started prepping for the day, the familiar rhythm grounding him. Whatever came next, he'd face it with a knife in one hand and his grandmother's wisdom in the other. Marcel stood in the community center's kitchen, a repurposed space with chipped counters and a stubborn oven. It was a far cry from L'Etoile d'Or's gleaming stainless steel, but it felt right. The air smelled of fresh basil and simmering tomatoes, the first batch of meals for the food initiative he'd agreed to lead with Dubois. Outside, a line of people waited, families, workers, elderly folks who'd fallen on hard times. His grandmother's face flashed in his mind, her hands stirring pots for neighbors in need. This was for her, too. Dubois was there, sleeves rolled up, her usual elegance traded for an apron. She was no chef, but she was trying, chopping carrots with a focus that almost hid her inexperience. They'd been at it for weeks, planning menus, securing donations, and turning this rundown kitchen into something alive. She'd kept her word, funding the project, deferring to his vision, even laughing when he teased her about her knife skills. But Marcel stayed cautious. Her apology had been real, but trust was a slow burn. These carrots are uneven, she said, frowning at her pile. You're going to critique me again, aren't you? Only if you keep holding the knife like a dagger, Marcel shot back, grinning. He adjusted her grip, their hands brushing briefly. Lou, sir. Let the blade do the work. She rolled her eyes but followed his lead, the carrots improving slightly. You're insufferable, you know that? Takes one to know one, he said, stirring a pot of vegetable stew. The banter was easy now, a rhythm they'd found over late nights planning the initiative. But he hadn't forgotten her old venom, the way her words once cut. He watched her, weighing every move, every smile. Was this the real Dubois, or a performance for her followers, who'd eaten up her posts about giving back? The project had taken off faster than he'd expected. Dubois' ex-posts, photos of them cooking, quotes about food as community, had drawn volunteers and donors. Local farmers sent crates of produce, and a bakery offered day-old bread. The first event, a free dinner for 50, had grown to 200 after her posts went viral. Marcel had mixed feelings about her influence. She'd opened doors, but her shadow loomed large, her name still bigger than his. Marcel, she called, wiping her hands. We need to talk about next month. I've got a sponsor lined up, big money. They want to expand to 3 nights a week. He set down his ladle, turning to face her. That's fast. We're barely keeping up now. You sure we can handle it? With more staff, yes, she said, leaning against the counter. I'll fund the hires. You pick the team. He nodded, but his gut twisted. Her money came with strings, even if she hadn't pulled them yet. "Let's see how today goes first," he said. "Then we'll talk." She studied him, her eyes sharp but not unkind. "You still don't trust me, do you?" He didn't flinch. "I'm getting there." "But you've got a history, Du Bois." "Fair," she said, her voice softer. "Keep me honest, then." The doors opened at noon, and the crowd poured in. Marcel and Du Bois served alongside volunteers, ladling stew, passing out bread, their movements a practice dance. Faces lit up, kids grinning over warm bowls, an old man thanking Marcel with a handshake. This was why he'd said yes, why he'd taken the risk. Cooking had always been about connection, not just skill. Halfway through, a woman approached, her phone out. "You're Marcel, right? From La Toile d'Or? I saw you on X. This is amazing." He smiled, wiping sweat from his brow. "Thanks. Just trying to feed good people." She snapped a photo, already typing. "My followers are gonna love this." Du Bois caught his eye across the room, a knowing smirk on her lips. He shook his head but couldn't help a grin. She was right, her platform was a megaphone, and it was working. By the time the last bowl was served, the room was empty, the air warm with gratitude. Marcel leaned against a wall, exhausted but full. Du Bois joined him, her apron smudged with sauce. "Not bad for a first run." "Not bad," he agreed. "You held your own." "Don't sound so surprised," she said, nudging his shoulder. "I'm learning." They cleaned up in silence, the volunteers gone, the kitchen quiet. As they scrubbed pots, she spoke again. "I was wrong about you, Marcel. Not just your cooking. You're building something here, something real. I want to be part of it, not just the money, but the work." He rinsed a pot, considering her words. "Why the change? You didn't care about any of this a few months ago." She set down her sponge, her face unguarded. "I was bored. Angry, maybe. I used my power to feel big, to keep people like you in place. But you didn't break. You made me see what I was missing, purpose. This," she gestured to the kitchen, "this feels better than any dinner party I've ever thrown." He studied her, searching for the lie. But her eyes held steady, raw in a way he hadn't seen before. "Keep showing up," he said finally. "That's what matters." She nodded, a faint smile breaking through. "Deal." Weeks turned into months, the initiative growing stronger. They served meals 3 nights a week, the sponsor deal sealed, a small crew hired. Marcel's recipes, simple, soulful dishes like his grandmother's, became the heart of it, while Du Bois handled logistics, her charm winning over donors. They bickered, laughed, burned a soufflé or two in late-night test runs. The tension of their past faded, replaced by a partnership neither had expected. One evening, as they locked up the community center, Du Bois stopped, her hand on the door. "Marcel, I never said it properly. I'm sorry for all of it. The insults, the cruelty. You didn't deserve it." He looked at her, the streetlight casting shadows on her face. "I know," he said. "You're making it right." She smiled, a real one, and they walked into the night, the city alive around them. La Toile d'Or still thrived, the lamb dish a legend, but this was bigger. Marcel had won not just against Du Bois, but for something greater. He'd turned her venom into purpose, her pride into partnership. And somewhere, he knew his grandmother was smiling. Back home, he checked X one last time. A new post from Du Bois, a photo of them serving stew, captioned, "Cooking with at La Toile Marcel. Food is love, and we're just getting started." Thousands of likes, but he didn't care about the numbers. He shut off his phone, the weight of the journey settling into something like peace. The battle was over, and he'd come out stronger.